with your spirit.
I welcome you to the funeral mass for Tricia Connolly. You've come as her family and friends to celebrate her life, to rejoice with God for the favors and love she gave everyone in her life. And we pray that now she be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven. Please be seated, and Michael will speak on behalf of the family.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Connolly. I'm Pat's only son. And on behalf of my father, Rich, and my sister, Patty, I'd like to thank you all for attending. It's unfortunate that my sister is unable to attend, but I know she would thank you for honoring my mom. She was my sister's best friend in the whole world. They loved each other very, very much. And welcome to Corpus Christi. My mom truly valued her faith. She prayed with my sister each night over the phone. When I was young, she encouraged me to be an altar boy and taught me my prayers. She was so proud of my daughter, Abigail, the way she sang so beautifully in church, and she had always loved hearing my son, Daniel, playing guitar at Mass. And Father Mahoney, she loved you. She was so excited to hear your sermons Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. And thank you for being here today. Our family really appreciates it. And I know my mom appreciates all of you being here. It's one of the last nice things you can do for my mom in your faith is to say a prayer for her. So please, today and at some point in the future, say a short prayer for my mom. I know that she would like that. I'm going to babble a little bit about my mom, but I'm going to wrap things up by reading something to honor her. And the reason I'm going to read is because the act of reading in and of itself is the greatest honor I can give to my mother. You see, it was my mom who taught me how to read. Way before fancy nursery schools or early learning centers or things like that, it was just me and my mom. She would put me on her lap. She would recite "See Spot Run, Work John Work." She took my little tiny hand, my little fingers, held it up to each and every word. She taught me the alphabet. She taught me sentences. I was reading books by kindergarten. When I was in grade school, she took me to the library over the summer a couple times a week. I was never spoiled as a kid. But my mom would always buy me any book I wanted. She never said no, not even once. She always encouraged me. She told me that I was smart. She never made me question that myself. And from time to time, if I ever got some kind of a small achievement or recognition, my mom was always prouder of me than I was for myself. And I think it was right for her to feel so great vicariously. Everything I've ever achieved in my life, I owe to my mother. And so, Mom, that's why I want to read to you today. It's only fair. You got to read to me first, so I'm going to read to you last. So what to read? There's so many verses that seem to talk about my mom at this present moment. There are passages that remind us that my mom is now free of suffering, and those certainly hit home. My mom always had an inner strength and a toughness about her, and it's comforting to know that her inner spirit is no longer confined by the physical struggles that she so bravely endured during her final years. It's so great to remember my mom as a strong woman. She had a strength of wills. She always stood up for herself and her family. She always spoke her mind. She never minced words, especially about my haircut. She never backed down to anything or anyone. My mom passed away on October 25th, and I've had time to think about her, and I do every day. But surprisingly, most of my thoughts have been about my mom as a younger woman. The pretty blonde in her late 20s, early 30s that raised me as a child. The woman younger than I am now that saw her oldest child graduate from college. The person who would be my contemporary today when she held her very first grandchild in her arms and carried him about so easily, chasing him around the house, playing together. And so maybe it's a bit of self-protection that keeps me from focusing on my mom's final days. But I'd like to think that it's more than that. I'd like to think that my mom's freedom from suffering hasn't taken her away from me, but has brought her back in ways that have eluded me for some time. It seems like now, for the first time in a long time, I can once again picture my mom, this amazingly strong, vibrant, dominant force of nature that she truly was. And I know she would want that. And I absolutely know that that's how she would want you all to remember her. So please, let's take a moment to do just that. Remember my mom. Remember Pat at her prettiest, at her strongest, at her best. And now when we have that thought in our head, please think of her that way from now on. Maybe even more than just saying prayers for her. Remembering my mom as a strong, beautiful woman is the best thing that you can do for her. And I know that she would like that. There's also a lot of passages that talk about Pat being in a better place. And indeed, throughout her life, my mom enjoyed many great places and times. She had quite a number of adventures as a young lady, as I'm sure my Aunt Joan here could testify to today. She told me how when they moved to Chatham High School, most of the kids were still listening to Pat Boone records, and she was one of the very first Elvis fans. She drove awesome cars. I remember as a kid, she had a 1958 black Chevy convertible with white interiors. Later in the 80s, she had a sporty Camaro with custom metallic paint. She got herself customized license plates. She got around, and she did so in style. She always had a great social life. When I was little, she showed me pictures of her hanging out with New York Yankees from the late 50s, early 60s when they were World Series champs. She loved going to the shore. She was listening to bands in Wildwood in the early 60s. She even caught the eye of a few famous musicians. When I was little, I inherited her box of old 45 records, and I played them on a tiny little record player. And like my mom, I was the first kid in my neighborhood who liked Elvis. But thanks to her, I was only 6 or 7 years old at the time. Mom, thank you for giving me the gift of loving music, and I've tried to pass that on to my kids as well. Abby, who benefits so much from her mom's own incredible, amazing talents. And Wendy, thank you for being here. Abby sings like you did in the choir when you were young. And Daniel, he's a sure musician. He plays his guitar at the Stone Pony, and he has his eye on his own cute blonde of his own. Mom, you're always going to live on through Dan and Abby. They were great grandchildren, and they will one day have your great-grandchildren. They'll tell your stories. Your legend will live on. And of course, speaking of better places, what better place is there than a bowling alley in New Jersey? Because that is where my mom met the love of her life. More on you a little later, big guy. But after she married my dad, the place my mom loved the most was with us. She always put us first. I remember the first movie I ever saw was Woodstock. She took us to a drive-thru, and later I said, Mom, why didn't you go to Woodstock, the greatest concert ever? And my dad replied, we were busy raising you. That's what my mom did. She always put us first as a family. When my sister and I left home, my mom and dad once again began a series of adventures, and their relationship seemed to have a renaissance. They started going to places together, and I believe in my heart of hearts that that was just the start of something that will last forever. Indeed, if any people deserve an eternity of happiness together, it's my parents. Closer to home, my mom adored running things as the president of the seniors in New Providence. She took such great pride in that. She planned events, she made new friends. She'd go take a bus to Atlantic City to put quarters in a slot machine all day. She planned lunches, she planned dinners. She loved to laugh. And to her friends here today, I want to thank you. In many ways, my mom's time with you was some of the happiest time she spent outside of her time with her family. Please know how much those times meant to her and how much you meant to her. Thank you for the friendship that you gave to my mom. Please remember Pat as a great leader and an even better friend. I know she would love that. And especially, speaking of friends, my mom's last great friend, Aricia, who's here today. Thank you. You watched over my mom. You took care of her. You gave her love. You were her second daughter. You're the newest part of our family. And my mom's, one of her greatest wishes was to spend her final days at home, not in a nursing home, not with some cold, uncaring people looking after her. You helped her achieve that goal. You are really a blessed person, and I know that she loves you. So besides thinking of my mom in bliss once again, in better places, it's also nice to imagine her in the accompaniment of people who are excited to see her again. And I can imagine her dad, Paul Gallica, mixing up a bunch of those really smelly, strong Manhattans that he used to brew up at Easter time. And her mom, my nanny, toiling away in the kitchen happily, making a Slavic feast of galumkis, pierogies, Kresny cookies, and maybe even the good kielbasa you could only find back in Newark in the day. And of course, my Uncle Steve's there. He's in the corner probably making snarky jokes and really, really eager to catch up on news of my Aunt Marie, who's watching from Georgia today, and all my mom's nieces and nephews. And to her sisters and to my cousins. I remember once they adopted the term the Gallica women. My mom told me at one point they slept 3 in a bed. And what an amazing life story. Just think of the history and the passages of time. This is a memorial from the 1940s to today, all that they saw, all that they did. And my cousins, what amazing achievements they all achieved. The Olympics, amazing grades, degrees, jobs, their own beautiful children. Obviously, and especially, you never spend as much time with people that mean a lot to you as you should. Nevertheless, to my aunts and my uncles and my cousins who are here today or who are watching from afar, please know that my mom loved you every day of her life. She was always so proud of you. She talked about you so often. And there's something to be said about bonds that prevail despite long absences. And as we get ready for a fairly long absence, those bonds will prevail. I love you, Mom. So yeah, it's refreshing to think of my mom in a better place, doing all the things that she used to love to do once more. And maybe thinking of her that way keeps her in our hearts. And maybe holding Pat in your hearts is that better place. So take a moment today. Open your heart up to my mom. Make a place for her. Carry her with you. And let her share in your future journey and your future joys. And if sometime in the future you're experiencing a moment of happiness that reminds you of her, simply think for a second, Pat would love this. I know she would like that. Anyway, I'm not going to read about any of that stuff. That'll come later in the Mass. What I wanted to do is read something that touches on how my mom was and how she spent her time here with us. I've already done a lot of that, but I left the most important and best for last, my mom's relationship with my dad. Now, this is a subject that anyone's words would be woefully inadequate to give even the merest of justice, but please bear with me as I try. Simply put, you can't talk about my mom's life without talking about my dad. My dad was 22 when he married my mom, 22. My dad is now 78 years old. They spent all of those years together. And my dad was the very last among us to be with my mom, and that was right. My mom's always been first in my dad's heart, and he deserved to be the last in hers. The last to tell her goodbye, the last to tell her that she was loved, the last of us to hold her hand, the last of us to care for her, and how amazingly he cared for her. If you believe in saints, they're people that walk the earth, normal people who do things that remind us of a goodness and a greatness. If you want to talk about a saint, look at my father. While I have many wishes for my children, one of the greatest is that they will each find someone who will love and cherish them the way that my dad loved my mom. Abby and Dan, if you ever doubt the existence of a true, genuine, eternal love, please think of Grandma and Poppy. They personify it. Love lives in your grandparents' heart, and so it beats in yours. And you two have the best hearts of them all. I pray that someday you'll find such a love. Maybe you have already, but when you do, think of Grandma. She will be smiling, and she'll like that. So I've talked about a few things my mom would like you to do for her, pray for her, remember her at her best, and so on, but I know that beyond all that, the most important thing my mom would want you to do is keep an eye out for my dad. How do I know that? Because true love isn't a one-way street. The very last real conversation I had with my mom was significant. She was running out of time. I knew it. She sensed it. And I'm at peace because of what she said. She spoke to me unequivocally. She said, I love you. She didn't say, I love you, but that hair. I love you. She told me that she was proud of me, that I was a good son, that I never gave her any trouble or worry. But some of her very last words were about my dad. She said that she was happy that I was with him and taking care of him. She looked at me with those beautiful blue eyes and she said, that comforts me. That comforts me. At a time that she was going through so much fear and struggle, it comforted her that my dad was being looked after. So please, from time to time, check in on my dad. I know my mom would like that. Anyway, I promised my mom I would read to her, so here I go. I'm going to read something from the book of Proverbs. It goes back many centuries, but it seems to capture my mom in a role that I knew her as best, a wife and a mother. And perhaps there's something about really great writers or writing that capture the essence of humanity that in a way survives and transcends history and civilizations. Or maybe stumbling across some ancient biblical text while you're trying to figure out what to do up here today that captures the essence and that captures and immediately conjures up thoughts of your own mom, connotes something more. Maybe it's that her time here wasn't just fleeting, but that she managed to show us in her own incredibly unique way those aspects of quintessential goodness that will be spoken of long into the future. So in any event, Mom and Dad, this is for you. A reading from the book of Proverbs. A wife of noble character, who can find? She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She's clothed in strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction, and those are on her tongue. She watches over the household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise and call her blessed, and her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward that she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gates. I love you, Mom. Thank you all for listening.